love it. We love it. We love it.
That's right.
Nate, glad to be here, brother. Welcome to another episode of the Mindful Warrior podcast. Man, it's good to be back. We got Gandalf, we got Jed, we got Gus, Nate, and a very special guest today, Nate.
That's right. We've been excited to talk to this guy since we started this.
Me too. I that excitement increased doubly when Riley and I had a chance to hang out at the Vegas cannabis deal a few weeks ago. So Riley Cote, former NHL enforcer, current spiritual astronaut, mindful warrior, my dude, Riley Cote, great to have you on the show, man.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome to have you. Where are you talking to us from?
I'm in just outside of Philadelphia in Doylestown, Pennsylvania.
Right on.
So about 45 minutes from Philly, yeah.
Doylestown.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, dude.
Is that where you're from?
I'm originally from middle of Canada, Winnipeg, Manitoba, but I've planted my roots in Pennsylvania and bounced around from a couple different spots here. But so now my roots are in Pennsylvania. My wife's from Delaware, which is about an hour away from here. So
that's
it's a
cool.
good spot, close to New York, close to Philly, close to the beaches, all that good stuff.
Nice.
And so you started playing hockey at what age?
Started playing hockey at the age of 5. I was on skates at the age of 3, 4, and then organized hockey at 5. So it's pretty much mandated back in Canada. Every kid plays hockey, and every kid plays hockey pretty early. And then as you get into your teenage years, I think kids wean out, and the competitive ones stick around. But I think every kid, boy or girl, seem to play hockey at one point in their lives.
That's crazy. It's just part of the culture in Canada.
It is, yeah. It is with the ice and then obviously with the elements there. Finding ice is very, very easy. Outdoor rinks, ponds, and indoor rinks. So the cost of ice is certainly a lot cheaper than it is, in the U.S. And especially as you go down south, less and less rinks, the cost of ice time increases. So it's just obviously geographical.
And hockey was started in Canada. Am I right?
It was. I'm not sure the exact year. I think the late 1800s or something, and it's evolved. If you see pictures and stuff of these guys back then, it was pretty raw looking with the equipment and the game itself with no boards and stuff. But that's certainly evolved into something pretty special. Yeah,
that's awesome. So was it always your dream to play in the NHL?
It was ever since I can remember, growing up and looking back at pictures, always had a hockey stick in my hand. Both my parents had season tickets to the Winnipeg Jets. They had an NHL team back then. They landed up actually leaving for 15 years to Phoenix, and then they got a new team back here in the last few years. But ever since I can remember, always wanted to be an NHL hockey player, and it was just one of those things that's ingrained into you at a young age, and something you strive for. So it was a blessing to actually play one game in the NHL, let alone 4 seasons. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Who were your NHL heroes as a kid?
Well, I had a few local ones to the Winnipeg Jets. I won a jersey when I was a young kid. His name was Scott Arneal. He was never a superstar or anything, but I landed up wearing number 11 through my junior hockey career and youth hockey career simply because of him. But guys like Teemu Selanne, you might have heard of, Mark Messier, a couple bigger guys.
Oh, yeah.
More of a power forward type guy. Teemu Selanne, obviously, because of the amount of goals he scored in Winnipeg. And then I had some, role player type guys that I looked up to, Ty Domi and Mike Eagles and these types of grinder type mentalities. But obviously there's a list more, but those ones are more, true to my heart, just being local. And then, Mark Messier was in Edmonton there, obviously, but just the way he played and carried himself was, why I leaned towards him for sure.
I remember
for a long time. I think he's got 4 or 5 Stanley Cups, I believe.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So take us through that process of getting to the NHL and maybe, what it's like to be a young player in Canada playing hockey. Here playing football, it's pretty linear, for the most part. I mean, there are levels to it. You start out in high school, then you get recruited to college. Some guys go to junior college, but then, it's pretty much you're either good enough to be drafted or undrafted and sign with a team in the NFL, or you're not and you go off, I don't know, you could play in the Arena League, but there isn't really a minor league. College football is the minors of the NFL.
Right.
So I think it'd be really interesting to hear kind of how that path, how you carved that path to the NHL. Did you play? Did your high school have a team? How did that work?
Yeah, for sure. I understand that all sports are somewhat different, especially football to the rest of them. But hockey is. I played my youth hockey in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I grew up, obviously from 5 to about 15 years old, playing through different organizations throughout the city of Winnipeg. I was drafted to the Western Hockey League, which is a Western version of the complete Canadian Hockey League. There's an Ontario Hockey League and a Quebec Junior Hockey League, and they're all tied under the umbrella of the Canadian Hockey League. So I was drafted to that league, which is the best junior hockey league, arguably, in the world. So I landed up moving to Saskatchewan at the age of 16, Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. Played 4 years with the Prince Albert Raiders there. And then when I turned 20, I turned pro. So I went back to juniors for one more year or turn pro, and I decided to turn pro, kind of be a bit smaller fish in a big pond, and as opposed to being a bigger fish in a small pond, and getting my feet wet in the pro game.
Yeah.
The other direction you mentioned is as far as college. That's kind of the two directions you can go with hockey. You can go the college route, or you can go the junior hockey route. Junior hockey is more like the pro game, the NHL game. There's fights. There's physical. There's accountability. Where college hockey is a little more run and gun. They wear the full cages. There's no fighting. There's hitting, obviously, but there's no, there's no accountability. And just the way with my style of play was, that seemed to be more fitting for me to take that approach. It wasn't exactly the style, a college type of player. So for me, that was an easy decision. Some guys battle that one back and forth, and they decide either way. For me, it was junior route, and then I landed up going to Toronto Maple Leafs camp when I turned 20 there. And then that was when I really kind of decided to take on this, enforcer, tough guy role. And, my goal going into camp was just to fight anybody, and the biggest guy, and the guy with the most penalty minutes. And, I kind of knew who the guys were. They were established NHL guys in training camp and stuff like that. So my first shift of training camp, I literally was out there 15 seconds, and I ran this guy. It was a clean hit, but I just pulverized him, and he was just belly up. And then the next thing you know, one of the guys I had on my radar come after me. So, shed the mitts, and then I landed up two punching him. So it landed up being a pretty good start to what landed up being my direction and identity going through the pro ranks and ultimately through the NHL. So I landed up in the minor leagues that year, in a minor league, so 2 leagues down from the NHL. Won a championship. The following year, played another year pro as a lateral move, still minor leagues in the East Coast Hockey League, different league but same level. Up and down again with the American Hockey League a little bit, and then in 2004, 2005, it was the NHL's not the last lockout, the lockout before. So it was arguably the best league in the world at that time, since the NHL wasn't going on. And we landed up winning a Calder Cup and championship in Philly. And then I signed, a 2-year deal after that, and just kept slugging it out, and eventually found my way to the NHL. But it was literally fighting 30, 35 times a year. Again, some of these mutants that you'd see in this league, bunch of juice monkeys and, just freaks of nature. So it was, it takes its toll. I was full of piss and vinegar and, eager to take on a new challenge, but it certainly takes its toll and wears on you. And not even so much physically, that's an obvious one, but, more the emotional and the emotional side of things, and, just to the generating of anxiety and the fight or flight response, where you're constantly in a fight response. So it's not a normal state to be in, and I think eventually it takes its toll for sure.
So is that, sorry, Nate.
No, I was just going to say, people have this misconception that just because you are a fighter, just because you are an enforcer, that you don't have the same type of fight or flight kind of panic or fear or pain sensors that everyone else does. And so that stigma is one of the hardest things that former combat veterans or enforcers in hockey or football or whatever have a problem shedding in the real world. We're all human beings dealing with that. I know that a lot of enforcers have had difficulty when they were done playing, right? So with prescription drugs and alcoholism, and I'm sure a lot of that has to do with the beatings they took.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is a tough mindset to stay in all the time. It's the fight or flight response is supposed to be like kind of here and now, but when it lands up being 3/4 of your calendar year of being in this mindset, it's not a natural state to be in. So I think that's why guys they struggle with sleep and anxiety. So a lot of them self-medicate with booze and pills, and obviously that's just the beginning of a deep dark hole.
Yeah.
So I see that, and I'm obviously managing their pain, physical pain, all that stuff. So I see that, and I think it's pretty common, not specifically to that role necessarily, but just I think in sports. But when you're pounding the body and in the head that often, I think you're more apt to self-medicate, and these guys land up self-medicating with the wrong substances, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But there's no question. For me, I was never a fighter. I knew I had it in me to be a fighter. You have to make a conscious decision to be something. You have to be fully dialed in to be in that state. But
and Riley, sorry, man, not to cut you off, but on that note. So in the NHL, guys, you said you made a decision to be an enforcer. I mean, would you say, is it in NHL teams, I mean, enforcer isn't like a position. It's not like right wing and enforcer. So that's like really a mentality that certain guys take on in the league. It seems as though, in football, coming from that world, or basketball or any other sport for that matter, really, you're not really stopping the game for a fight. And I think that's really interesting in the NHL, how fighting is actually part of the game. It's part of the culture. It's part of the entertainment of it. And it's interesting to me, that guys guys can make a living as I'm the fucking enforcer of the Philadelphia Flyers. I think. Can you speak a little to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's what separates hockey from other sports is the accountability factor and the ability to self-police, and that's why I think in hockey they've always carried the meat and potatoes types of guys.
Yeah, so it's viewed as a self-policing tool, the fighting.
It really is. It was brought in actually by the Philadelphia Flyers. I think I want to say in 73, 74, they landed up winning 2 Stanley Cups as the Broad Street Bullies. And back then it was strategy, to basically like out-muscle, push on your opponent and push them out of the building where, you're just too tough of a team that, you out-compete the opponent. Eventually other teams caught on and they matched the toughness with toughness, and then it kind of created a bunch, teams with a bunch of, a few meatheads here and there that would, keep the peace. And the game has evolved with the fighting from, pretty barbaric bench clearing brawls, line brawls, to all these, to all of a sudden they put the instigator rule in. And now you're seeing like less and less fights every year. And like no team is really carrying an enforcer anymore. They're still fighting in hockey, but they're more emotional fights and spontaneous fights versus, well, someone gets cheap shotted, all of a sudden the next stoppage, the coach puts out, their fourth line with the, the heavyweights, and then whether they go after the guy that actually did the cheap shot, or they just like mutually fight because it's that's the way it has to happen within the rules. That's the kind of the way it happened. But fear is a powerful thing, and what I've learned throughout this process is that you can act as tough as you want, and you can puff your chest out, and you find who the real contenders are. Because from what I've learned, like 98% of the guys you puff your chest out to, they might just peep and say a couple words, but they'll go away. And then you got 2%, maybe 1% might actually puff their chest back and act tough and maybe fight you, but probably won't. But at least he'll act it. And the other 1%, he's the guy that you have to worry about and actually will fight you. But when you instill fear, and not even so much fear, it's just play. It's called role playing for a reason. I wasn't out there to I'm not really a truly mean guy. I acted that way. I acted crazy and fearless, and it's an attitude you take on.
For sure.
But at the end of the day, it's like when you call someone's bluff and you get in their face and you make them accountable, most people, go away. And that's, that's the element that this brings. And it actually does, believe it or not, bring a respect and a calming effect to the game at times, because shit hits the fan, and all of a sudden it's like, now we're gonna have a couple fights, and the big dogs are gonna come out and do their business, and then we're gonna move on with the game and with a little bit of peace and quiet here. So that was kind of it. And then obviously when you're down a couple goals and you need a spark, a fight certainly ignites the building up. So then you use it as a strategy a strategy to build your team up and get some energy in the building. So
we should have
it's changed.
We should have enforcers for social media.
Yeah,
people who go out there in the real world and hold people accountable for the shit they talk online.
Yeah,
exactly.
Hey, are you gonna keep talking that shit? So, like you said, though, it was ended up being that 1% that you would really have problems with, or that you would have to fight with. Over your years in the NHL, was there one or two guys that you had a rivalry with, that you fought multiple times, that you guys knew that you were going to have to beat the shit out of each other?
Yeah, there was actually a few guys. There was a few guys that I had met up in the minor, squared up with the minor leagues a few times, and then we transferred over to the NHL and still continued fighting. I'm trying to think of guys maybe out west you'd know, but guys like Cam Jansen. I fought George Larocque 3 times, Donald Brashear 5 times, Sean Thornton 5 times. There's probably at least 10 or 12 guys that I fought in more than 2 or 3 times, and there's certain guys that are 100% gamers. I would call myself one of those guys when I played. Like if I was playing against one of these guys, like I knew 100% I was fighting. There's no question, because these guys are hungry. They're foaming at the mouth during warm-ups, and you know what I mean. There's no way out. So
are you guys like staring at each other from across the ice, like it's going down?
Oh yeah. We do like the whole charade. You guys stretch at the red line there, and
right.
You know what I mean. It's basically like pissing on the other guy's line, and basically standing there and acting tough, and you kind of you're kind of setting the tone and setting the message right from the start, because there is a ton of strategy. I mean, I see it in football where guys, guys psych themselves up, and I don't. It's not really about fighting, but it's in rugby and these sports, and it's about intimidation and getting into the opponent's head a little bit. So the same strategies apply in hockey, no question.
Yeah, but you were the absolute tip of the spear there, and you had to actually go in with a much different mentality than everybody else. You were going to have to, throw punches and get smacked in the face while everyone else just worked with the puck,
Yeah.
Riley, what was your record? Do you know? Do they keep track of that?
I don't know, because it's somewhat subjective, especially from a fan standpoint to from the two guys in combat. In hockey, it's hard to gauge the winner by the guy that the guy that lands on top, because I've been in fights, and I've seen a ton of fights where I could throw 10 punches and the guy just out of a self defense mode throws a hip toss and throws me to the ground because he wants out and he bails out. And he lands on top and the crowd goes crazy. But I know I got 6 or 7 good licks in. Between the two of us, we know who won the fight.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. But like all the critics and stuff like that will be like, well, he landed up top and blah blah blah. So, but I would say as far as clean wins versus losses, I got to be like. I got to be over 50% on the wins. There's certainly a ton of draws where I could be honest with myself and be like, that was a really good fight, but there's no clear winner here. You know what I mean? It was just like a good battle, and both combatants get a ton of respect. So, and I took my share of beatings. I'm fighting guys way out of my weight class, and and some of these I was just barely trying to hold on, because I'm fighting guys. Some guys like 6'6", 260 pounds, 270 pounds, and. And very rarely did I fight a guy, somewhat my size. And those fights were like, when I did have those fights, were like unbelievable, because I was just like, I felt like I was unstoppable, because I could take, 5-10 punches and the guy's not going to basically crack my skull.
Right.
So I can, I could be a little more open and more aggressive with those fights. So,
Riley, how'd you medicate before those games? Did you? Were you taking painkillers? Were you using anything to like pregame to deal with the aches and pains in your body?
Pre-game, I really didn't. I didn't really do a whole lot of pain management. Actually, at all. Really, it was usually the night before, the day of. It was just trying to like loosen up and And if there was pain or stiffness, just you kind of manage it with movement and stuff like that. But certainly after the game, I've always been a cannabis consumer and have been since a young age, 15 years old or so. It wasn't until I really turned pro that I really understood the therapeutic and healing properties of it. I think it was always fogged out from alcohol and other recreational drugs that I was consuming back then. So it didn't really speak to me until I started consuming it sober. But before games, never, always after. It was just one of those things. Obviously, when I was younger in the party mode too, it landed up being a lot of drinking too. So I mean, it's now, unfortunately, that's not the way to medicate.
Right, but through your research, are you still receiving the therapeutic benefits of cannabis, like I guess neuroprotectant or the brain stuff or anti-inflammatory, if you are also consuming alcohol and doing other recreational things?
I still think you do to a certain extent. I think, but I do think like alcohol is pretty destructive on the human body, mind, and spirit. I really think that I think it takes away a lot of therapeutic value. Where I think cannabis has a way of speaking to you if you do it quietly on your own time, and when you're able to listen to yourself. I think I think there's a lot of noise involved in alcohol. It's a lot, you know what I mean. But I still do feel like you get the relaxing effects. I'm not sure that you get nearly the effects you would sober, because we might call it a wash when it's all said and done. But obviously, alcohol dehydrates you and all that stuff too. So I mean, I look at cannabis as a total wellness tool, and alcohol the complete opposite. You know what I mean? As far as one's promoting recovery, and the other one's working against recovery. So I certainly suggest doing it sober without that stuff. You could certainly feel the therapeutic and healing properties much better.
For sure. But there's this like debate going on versus, recreation versus medicinal. And I think about my own experience using it. I started using it, of course, quote unquote, recreationally when I was 14 years old. It was the month before I ever put on a football helmet. And so I basically, in my mind, I was protecting my brain as I was doing this, even though I wasn't doing it intentionally to medicate. I was doing it because I liked it, because it spoke to me, like you're talking about. It speaks to some people more than others. I understood that at a very early age, but I didn't know that it was actually helping my body recover. I drank sometimes. I mean, I wasn't a big drinker in high school or in college, but I was always using cannabis. And I do believe that even though I was using it for my own kind of quote unquote recreational purposes, that it was medicinal, and it's protected my brain for the next 15 years of head smacking. And I don't, it's hard to convey that. That's a kind of a fuzzy line when we go in this cannabis space. And especially as athletes, people ask, well, do you want to get high, or are you using it for medicine? And they can't understand that the two might be the same. Yeah. And that something that's good for you might actually give you some peace of mind. Yeah. It's not just some like pill that you take from the pharmacy that makes you feel like, nothing.
Yeah. I mean, I think to that point, everybody who consumes cannabis does it because it makes them feel better.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree. I did this podcast last night with this woman who she's a canna mom, and she's using cannabis to help cure her postpartum depression, help her deal with that. And it's totally changed her life. And she said that the first time smoking a joint since she was like 14, because she thought, it's not what adults do and it's not something that, grown people do. After this insane experience of postpartum depression and anxiety and just total insanity and chaos, she came to cannabis one night after her second daughter was born, smoked a joint, and she said she slept for 8 hours for the first time in like 7 years. And it's like that reminded me of, oh my God, I remember those initial feelings of like the great sleep. I guess I should feel very grateful that I've found cannabis and it's such an integral part of my life. And now I do, I'll sleep 6 to 8 hours through the night every night and wake up feeling incredibly rested. And I think that has a lot to do with cannabis. I'm not a heavy sleeper. I'm not a great sleeper in general, and I think cannabis has helped me sleep. And it's like that little bit of getting someone a full night's sleep, that's like life-changing.
Yeah.
That changes a person's whole mindset. And I think, just for that fact alone, it's difficult for me. The lines, immediately begin to blur of the recreational and medical discussion. We've talked about it before, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know
I
if there
agree.
is.
I don't think there's such thing as a recreational cannabis. I think everything is therapeutic or medical cannabis. And I mean, not even sure I love using the word medical, to tell you the honest truth. I use like using the word healing because I think it kind of, I think we have like this extreme, opposite end of the spectrums. You have people that are, on their deathbed and they're finally finding cannabis or seeking cannabis, just to basically give themselves a spirited death.
Yeah.
And then you got people on the other side of it are just like, they claim they're just strictly recreational users, but like there's a reason why humans are drawn to this plant and have been so drawn to this plant throughout Prohibition is because there is something very real about it. It is resonating with the human spirit, or it's trying to. And that's what people are gravitated towards. It makes you feel good. It makes you feel better. And, puts a smile on your face. It gives you relief, helps you relax, and helps you sleep. To me, these are all elements of prevention of disease and just overall wellness. So, I mean, like you said, you talk about sleep. I mean, if you fuck with your sleep, everything is off. But if you can promote sleep and if you can promote relaxation, rest, and helping with anxiety and all these things, to me, if us three smoke together and we have a couple laughs, well, why is everyone all of a sudden calling that recreational? Because three of us are consuming together,
right?
Or we're not talking about the actual therapeutic relief we're actually getting from the joint or however smoking. So I think why don't we call it recreational eating? You know what I mean? Right. Recreational cheeseburgers and recreational Slurpees.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally fine for us to get together and get hammered and drink 20 beers and take shots all night and get, just out of our minds. But yeah.
And then to take Ambien to sleep.
Yeah.
And then Adderall to wake up.
Maybe not wake up.
And then Xanax to relax because I had a stressful meeting. And then fucking Vicodin because my back hurts. I don't know if you guys saw Tiger Woods' toxicology report came out. He had this DUI. They thought it was a DUI a couple months ago. There was video. He was slurring. He didn't know where he was. Well, it came out. He had no alcohol in his system. What he had was Ambien, Dilaudid, Vicodin, Xanax, and some other inhibitor or something. And it's just like, Jesus fucking Christ, Tiger.
Yeah, right.
Smoke some weed.
Put the pills
exactly,
down,
man.
Put them down.
And there's obviously doctors along the way who are enabling that behavior in Tiger, who he's become to trust and who write him all these prescriptions and who are contributing to one of the best athletes. I mean, I guess it's debatable whether golf players or golfers are athletes, but he is one of the best ever, man, and he's been confined to fucking being a zombie.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, as a hockey player in the NHL, how does the NHL view your own philosophy about this? I mean, do they view it specifically recreationally? Are they open to looking at it medically? And actually enlighten us a little more about their testing procedures, because we've heard that they don't test for it at all. I mean, we often say that to try to get the NFL to ease up on their restrictions, but let us know a little bit about what the culture of cannabis is like in the NHL.
Well, the culture of cannabis in the NHL is pretty quiet amongst the players actually using it. The organizations and the actual league itself are pretty old school guys, and they're old school where drinking is fine, okay, but cannabis is still very taboo, and we basically run parallel to the medical establishments. Protocols and belief systems. There's a ton of players that consume cannabis, much like the NFL. I mean, a majority of the guys are from Canada. Cannabis culture in Canada is pretty happening and has been for a long time. But they're quiet about it. You don't see nearly as many guys, well, virtually any guys, really step out of that comfort zone like NFL guys do and stand their ground and make a point. We don't see that really in NHL. As far as drug testing goes, when I played, we got tested 3 times a year, and I believe it's still the same way. There's test A, B, and C. A is for performance-enhancing drugs, obviously, steroids, methamphetamines, all that stuff. B, street drugs. So going back to A, 25-game suspension, no pay, and it becomes public. B is street drugs. You get tested positive. You do not lose pay, and there's no game suspension. You do go to the substance abuse program for 30 days, but they're only really looking for hard drugs, high amounts of ecstasy and cocaine and those things. If you test positive for THC, they will include that when they call you up. But I don't know anybody that's ever been called up specifically for THC and thrown into the substance abuse program for THC alone. So I think they kind of just turn a blind eye to it. It's not specific, like, what is your 80 nanograms or something like that in NFL?
It's like
15
yeah, it's
or
35.
something.
They raised it from 15 to 35.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, yeah. So it's basically like you can't have virtually any THC in your system. So,
right.
But so from what I understand, it's just it's a blind eye, because I would have tested positive every time, and I never got a phone call, whether I had that good of luck as far as and the C one was a placebo, so it was nothing. So you had a 1 in 3 chance of getting tested for street drugs, 1 in 3 chance of getting tested for PEDs, and then the other one is 1 in 3 chance of just having a placebo. So I never, if I had that good of luck, thank the Lord, but I think it was just one of those. It's like kind of turn a blind eye. Let's not pursue this type of thing. So that's what I've learned.
So were you doing it kind of the whole time while you were playing? Was it part of your regimen?
Oh yeah. I've been a regular cannabis consumer since I got introduced to it at a young age at 15. So my whole pro career, I mean, I virtually every night. I mean, there's no question. As long as I wasn't flying and whatever else, that was when it landed up becoming a problem. When that's when you're forced to kind of dip into the pills and stuff, because you're still trying to manage pain and sleep. But now you're flying and you don't have the dry product with you. So. So from what I understand and from the stories I've heard, the people that have ever actually heard from the substance abuse program about THC is that they tested positive for other street drugs as well, not specifically THC. And I would have tested positive, like I said, because there was the one time I ate a brownie, and not 30 minutes later I got a text from our medical trainer saying we're getting tested tomorrow. So there's no question.
Did you try to like vomit it out really quick, or like?
No.
Nothing
I
just
enjoyed it. Just enjoyed it.
Were you even worried about it?
I really wasn't, to tell you the honest truth. No, I think my mentality back then was like it was fearless in every capacity. So that one was just like kind of live by the sword, die by the sword, and just like I'm doing this because it gives me relief, and no one's gonna stop me unless they pop me. But
I get it.
Yeah, man. So now what's your regimen like now? Because you don't have to fight anybody anymore. You don't have to take punches to the head. You don't have to be in those environments, but you still love cannabis like we do. We actually all met in the cannabis space working with Athletes for Care, which is a nonprofit organization. We've all started hoping to provide wellness resources and holistic pain medication resources to athletes. And so how do you do that for yourself in your own personal life, and how do you kind of school people on how to do that themselves?
Yeah, so I think my approach towards life is completely different than when I played. Like basically the most opposite you can ever imagine. So I went from this total meathead fighter, do anything to build muscle mass and be tough and be crazy and put anything in my body to do all that whole thing. And it eventually came to a screeching halt when the physical body can't go any further. The wheels start falling off the carriage. Physical body, I feel like the mind and the spirit were just right there with it. Before you get into that, why did you walk away from the game? Did you get cut and couldn't get back in? Did you decide that it was over? Walk us through that process before you tell us about how you live now. Yeah, so I was 28 years old. Our coach at the start of the year, a month in, got fired, so we had a new coach. There was, I had some nagging injuries throughout that season, but this new coach came in. I wasn't playing a ton, but I was also, again, not that concerned about it because I was a little bit banged up and everything. So towards the end of that, we landed up having a really good season and went to the finals and lost to Chicago Blackhawks, and they won the Stanley Cup. But going into that off season, I was like, I had a lot of questions about like what about next year and what the hell was going to happen. Can I keep fighting? Can I keep up this pace and all that? I got up getting a phone call that summer from our general manager at the time, Paul Holmgren, and I had another year on my contract, and he offered me a coaching position with the Flyers minor league team. The assistant coach down there had left and did whatever else. There was an opening. He knew where I was at. I think he knew that I was physically breaking down and was kind of seeing the writing on the wall. So he offered me this job, and the other option would have been I would probably land up getting sent down to the minor leagues that next season. I would have gone to Flyers training camp, and if I wouldn't have had an unbelievable camp and re-earned my spot. I probably went down in the minors, and I thought about that, and I just was tired of fighting, to tell you the honest truth, especially fighting in the minor leagues against, super hungry kids that are full of piss and vinegar that, everybody would be coming after me. So make a name for themselves and all that stuff. So I just, I kind of had one of those epiphanies, and I saw a way out of the game with an opportunity on the other side of it in pro sports, which I, thought was a great thing at the time. And so I had an opportunity to transition out of the playing, but, stay, have a job, obviously, be employed by a sports organization, but be a teacher, and and find myself. So I sat back and thought about that for about 24 hours, and I thought, it seemed like a simple decision for me. You know what I mean? I love it. I love the game. I love playing it, but like, you can only take so many injuries, and you can only be on the shelf so much, and you can only, run your body and your mind into the ground so much before, like, life starts slapping you around a little bit, and you know what I mean, and kind of forcing you the direction that the universe wants you to go, and that was kind of the reality of the situation. So, I made the decision, and I've never looked back on it. I never regretted it. I thought it was the best decision I could make, because I found myself. You know what I mean? I found my true calling. I was able to, to discover holistic healing and alternative medicines, and, not exclusively cannabis and hemp, but a ton of other things that I've never really been, I've been introduced to some of these things before, but never really, connected to them. And so for me, it landed up being a blessing in disguise at the time. I knew I was doing the right thing, but I didn't know how impactful the decision was on my, on my life. Because, outside of sports, I mean, it's great to be an athlete. It's great to, play pro sports, but like, it's pretty one-dimensional in the grand scheme of like life and what your purpose is. You know what I mean? So I think it was, maybe more of a spiritual awakening happening, and, the universe kind of tapped me on the shoulder and pushing me around a little bit to make some moves, because what I was doing was no longer serving me. You know what I mean? I needed to make some moves, and that's what I did. I changed everything. I stopped drinking for a full year. I cleaned up my diet. I started cutting out all and every processed food that I knew that was probably contributing to health issues and wellness issues, and just started to read, which I never really did, and started to transition from whey proteins to plant-based proteins, and just learn. I started taking some courses on essential oils, and just just all different types of healing, Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine. I started learning about how people healed forever up until we started making oil-based pharma, and just kind of getting back to my roots and finding my purpose. And I soon discovered that cannabis is a wellness tool, as a total package as far as a healing tool, and learned about the nutritional profile, the hemp seeds, and started learning about different compounds in cannabis besides the THC and CBD and all that stuff. And again, just kind of dedicated my whole life to being a better person, and and being a more spirited person, but helping change the world, by helping people heal and self-heal is what it is. Really, is passing on knowledge and passing the ingredients off to people where I'm not healing them, the doctor's not healing them, they're healing themselves, because that's the way it was designed to work. You know what I mean? Self-healing is critical if you want to live a high quality of life. You can live till you're 80 years old, but if the last 15 years, if you're dispirited and you're all banged up on different dementia pills and this and that, and what kind of life is that? So the goal in life is to find quality of life, but also to help people and serve others. So I think that's the direction I've found, that something negative at the time, it seemed like turned into extremely positive part of my life.
Talk a little bit about what you learned about the healing process and how it used to be. You said before we started using all these pharmaceuticals, there was kind of a tried and true, maybe not tried and true, but there was a formula to healing that people had done in the past that had been effective, and that learning that has informed the way you look at healing now and look at your own holistic properties. Talk a little bit about what you learned.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've complicated healing and medicine in the West. I think we've gotten away from prevention of disease and simplifying health. We've become so disconnected where we value highly expensive pills that are made in a laboratory, but we can't grasp that an herb like cannabis can be medicine or a healing. So what I've learned is that Mother Nature gives us everything we need, from food to medicine and everything in between. But we're so greedy and we're so money driven and we're so resource controlled and driven that we need to control resource and we need to control science. So I think the science part has complicated everything, because science isn't truth. Not yet. I mean, it can be
evolving, right? Yeah,
it's always evolving, and you can prove whatever you want to prove in the name of science. You know, if we need to prove that cannabis was a healing plant, we could do that in 30 seconds. If you know what I mean, if all the big players chose to do that. Unfortunately, they chose to do the other thing, is to take a plant and use science in a negative way. So you know, that's the problem I have with that. So when we trust science so much. But like, as we know, we're talking about cannabis, which has been outlawed for 80 years, but it's been part of the U.S. pharmacopoeia for 150 years, been part of natural healing methods across the planet for over 10,000 years. But all of a sudden, it's like man comes in and just wrecks that. But he doesn't wreck that just because he thought it was a bad plant. Is because it interferes with corporate business. So you know what I mean. You kind of slam it, you rearrange some science, and you prove what you want to prove, and you outlaw it. So we know that it's a healing plant, but science is still saying it's not. So like we are literally like 200 years behind what the true science is actually going to show for a lot of these things. You talk about psychedelics, you know what I mean? It's like those will be, that's the next fight, but we'll be fighting. Those will be Schedule 1, and those will be on the shelf for another 50, 60 years. But those are conscious forms. We all know that. And that's been proven since the start of time, but the science isn't right. We don't know the science on it, because again, we're basically slowing down the progression of evolving humans by lying to them, by feeding them garbage, literally like mental garbage, and enslaving them with poison. Really, I mean, it's what it comes down to. So we complicate things. We complicate things. So what I've learned in this process is less is more. Getting back to our natural instincts and following the universal laws. I mean, I used to think that I wanted to put a huge gym in my house. Well, now I wake up at 4:00 in the morning and bang out yoga. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's free. You know what I mean? I don't need a $10,000 gym. That's like my old my meathead way back in the day. You know what I mean? That's ego. That's material. But everything you have, everything that you need to sustain life and to heal and to stay moving is very, very simple. And we've been doing this forever. We drift away from it. We got to spend $1,000 a month on a personal trainer. We got to buy this $100 tub of whey protein, which is just the worst thing you can put in your body. And we got to buy the most expensive drugs and supplements and all this stuff. And it's like, and we're just consumerists, you know what I mean? It's all about consumerism, and we're just disconnected. What happened to just popping by the local farmer and buying some produce, right? Or you know what I mean, or growing your own cannabis, or you know what I mean, or just farming hemp, and you know what I mean. We're living in the Stone Ages, really.
I think there's a movement back towards that, though. In many ways, and I think that the cannabis movement, in many ways, is a direct. Materialization of that, of the
rejection of pharmaceuticals.
And this back to the earth. There's a ton of awareness about plant-based diets and how our meat is processed in this country and how animals are treated and all of that, which is, there's tons of this conscious awakening happening. You see it in many areas, and I think that the cannabis movement, us sort of breaking out of this prohibition phase where our government has put this plant on lockdown. I think that in many ways the global conscious is moving that out of the way, and the cannabis movement is a part of that.
Yeah,
it's very regional. It's very regional too. Like where we live in California and certain progressive cities and states,
but
more likely to endorse that or embrace it.
But I think
food as well. There's a lot of places in this country where you can't find healthy
organic food.
I mean, where just fast food is everywhere, and people live these sedentary lifestyles. Of course, digital technology and the propensity for people to sit in front of their computers and having computers take their jobs isn't making us any healthier either.
No.
You know what I mean? If we sit in front of a computer all day and then for an hour go, like you said, with a trainer at the gym. I mean, is that really a healthy lifestyle? No, not really. You know what I mean? And so for me, whenever I go to the gym and try to reconnect with my meathead, like you said, Riley, I get my muscles feel big, but then the next day I hurt, like my back hurts. I feel out of proportion. But when I have like an active life where I'm doing things that are sensible, that don't trigger those things, I feel really healthy. And like you, I don't use anything other than cannabis. I don't use any pharmaceuticals. I try to eat well. I could eat better. But you mentioned psychedelics a minute ago. I wanted to touch on that. You talked about that being stimulating your conscience or your consciousness. But what about the body? Do you think that psychedelics can help heal the body, like we are talking about cannabis might be able to heal the body?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a little bit differently than cannabis does. You can use a little bit of cannabis and you get an instant relief as far as relaxation or pain management. I think psychedelics, specifically like mushrooms or LSD, something like that. I think it's a little bit more about the mind. You got a ton of mental health issues. I think you got a lot of like depression and anxiety and identity crisis. I think on that side of it, I think psychedelics can certainly help people. Basically get back on the right path, maybe have some closure to some deep-seated issues that they've been troubled with, and create some sort of, reconnect with their own being. I think that's what psychedelics do. They kind of help you have a conversation with yourself and put life in perspective. So, from a physical standpoint, I think more of a mental standpoint, psychedelics can certainly help with cluster headaches and depression issues and PTSD, and even from my understanding in the opioid crisis, microdosing psychedelics, to take away the cravings or maybe to kind of change the biochemistry of the brain or whatever it may be. But certainly a whole other animal there.
Well, I think that what's really interesting, when you learn about addiction, much of it is about, isolation and feeling cut off from any connection to other people, to love. And I think that, microdosing psychedelics, because it puts you into this connected state where your empathy is increased, is enhanced, your connectedness to others, your emotional depth and willingness to be open to others. I think that, increasing all those things in many ways can help sever those addictions to the opiates that are caused by such depressed, isolation, driven psychological issues.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, because I think the opposite of addiction is connection. I think that's the whole thing, is like we are so disconnected from everything, from our food, medicine, from just talking to people, eye to eye, where everything is text, and the communication, the connection in general to ourselves and our own spirit is completely gone, where I see the problem as a whole. And obviously everyone's story is a little bit different. Everyone's got, their own personal story of what really started this addiction, but we are very disconnected beings, and you're only going to see more and more addiction, especially when you keep pumping heroin on the streets and, legalized heroin and to boot and all this other stuff. And we glorify substance. We don't really do a good job of separating substances, as far as if you went to an AA program, well, they would lump cannabis in that program as a hardcore drug, but you wouldn't talk about tobacco, or you wouldn't talk about refined sugar.
Right.
But the refined sugar certainly has more of a grasp on your health and your brain than any other ones there, and tobacco as well. But we just we seem to just lump substances all together as they're all the same. But I think that's what they want. They want you confused. They want you to believe that the word drug, is an umbrella word for, these ones, and these ones are not drugs and whatever else. But, I think we complicate things, but we need to reconnect. And I think the psychedelics are so powerful, and they can download so much information and so much healing properties in such a small amount of time. I think that's why it works so well, because, you can do all kinds of small little things outside of psychedelics that help you reconnect. Maybe you start cleaning up your diet, you connect to your food a little bit better. Maybe you transition to cannabis a little bit, but you're not doing it enough. But I think that speeds up the process. One trip or one week of microdosing and stuff like that. That's like eons of information downloaded to your brain, and and the connecting. I don't know the science behind it, but it does something. I've eaten mushrooms a ton, and there's something there where every time you leave your trip with almost so you feel like you've accomplished something. You almost feel like you've discovered something about yourself, or this, you know what I mean, and self-discovery. And
for sure,
I think that's what people mean. That's the connection you're talking about. Is people with addiction and depression issues, they need to find closure of why it's making them feel like that. But you know what I mean, to reconnect and ground out a little bit.
Yeah.
I've read stories about, lore about people being sick for months or years or having this phantom sickness, and a shaman gives them something to drink, and they drink it, and they dance around a fire for 4 or 5 hours, collapse from exhaustion, sleep for 2 days, and wake up and they're cured. Type of thing.
Yeah.
So I think there's these elements of, these circuits that are kinked in our brains that, the modern world does not allow us to kind of open up, and maybe psychedelics do, to unkink the hose and let it flow.
I got chills with that, brother. Fuck.
Yeah, I like it. No, Evan and I were talking about doing ayahuasca journey.
Yeah,
maybe we should do that, man.
Absolutely. I think we need to do that, because you talk about something like ayahuasca, and if you know anything about it, like I've never tried it, but I've read enough and watched enough documentaries on it. But like you're talking about, what is it, a root and a vine, two separate pieces to this concoction to brew this ayahuasca. But I mean, in the Amazon jungle, there's thousands and thousands of plants.
Yeah.
For someone to have ever discovered how one actually turns off the ability to process DMT or whatever, and the other one's working with it, like how to discover something like that is like ancient as it gets, primal as it gets, and that is supposed to be handed on to to the descendants. So ancestors pass it on, you pass it on. Like, we're supposed to be evolving consciously, and we talked about that a little bit earlier. But I think as a whole planet, we should be a little bit further on than where we are if we were able to tap into these resources. If you talk to all these Steve Jobs of the world and these people that have created all kinds of technology and all this growth and made all this change, and a lot of them talk about psychedelics.
For sure.
The stuff that's whether it's inspired them, but it's kind of helping them connect the dots, because these are connectors. And I think our evolution, spiritually and mentally, could be a lot further. I think we're basically mentally enslaved to a system of of pollution and poison, really. And these things kind of they open decalcify the pineal gland, and they promote consciousness, and they help heal, and they help bring spirit back into individuals. So God knows we need that right about now.
Absolutely. Amen. Are you still coaching right now?
I'm not. No, I'm out of corporate sports as recent as about a month and a half ago. So I'll be doing my own coaching stuff.
Corporate sports.
I like
That's
it.
a good term.
Are you? How do you feel about that? Is that a good transition?
Yeah, I feel pretty damn good about it. I felt the day I heard the news, I was actually very liberated, to tell you the honest truth. I felt like I haven't felt like that in my whole life, because I've been a hockey player, and then when I turned pro, I was obviously trying to make the NHL, and I lived within the structure of corporate America, and presented myself the way that they wanted me to, and all this stuff. Not that I'm a non-professional, but I feel like now I'm actually able to be my own person and stand my ground without having to worry about having someone call me up and say, well, we're going to release you because your stance on a plant. You know what I mean? So I couldn't be happier, telling you the truth. I'm still going to do sports stuff and hockey stuff, and obviously with Athletes for Care and integrating cannabis and hemp into the healing realm of sports. I'm always going to be passionate about that, but I think I need to spend my time on the cannabis and hemp space, and helping serve others, and introducing it to people that need it, and and changing the game that way.
I was going to say, all those things you were just describing to us about your own transformation and the stuff you were learning, were you able to convey that to any of the young guys that you were coaching? I mean, or were they not even, were they not open to hearing that?
I was, and it ended up being the older guys, the guys that had been around a little bit, because it's the same story. I found that, as you get over the 25 years of age hump, and you get into 26, 27, you see a lot of these guys, you know, the physical body starts deteriorating, you know what I mean? And so, like, it's always the older guys that are seeking these answers, you know what I mean? They're trying to find the wisdom, and the young guys still think they're invincible and they can do whatever they want. But it's, you know, it's usually the older guys. So I always connected with the older guys on that element, because they always come to me, you know what I mean? They knew I had, you know, some information to share, and I never, as far as cannabis or hemp, I was very, like, cautious of how I approached that with those guys. So usually I would let them, you know, spark it up, or if I knew a guy was really banged up, I would, you know, get into his head and talk to him a little bit. But older guys, for sure, very receptive. They loved it. They, you know, I had these heart to hearts. A lot of these guys on every single day. For the younger guys, they weren't ready for it yet. You know what I mean? They were so raw and naive that I didn't want, you know, them calling their agent or whatever and saying the assistant coach is talking about this, and this, because they don't understand it yet, and then all of a sudden it's causing shit. So
right.
I picked my battles with the guys that I got into real deep conversations about all this stuff with. And there was a couple of guys that we'd have conversations exactly like we're having right now, talk about psychedelics, talk about Joe Rogan podcast, and talk about, you know, some guys are pretty open, but it's always the older guys that have kind of lived a little bit and had a little bit of struggle, and, you know, had the wheels fall off the carriage a little bit, that they're, you know, they're seeking other alternatives. So,
well, I'm glad you got out of there. I'm glad you're part of this space now. I know it's a value for all of us who are working in this to have your voice involved, because you're so passionate and educated about it. That's really what the hard part about it is, getting athletes to be able to speak intelligently about this stuff. Really, it's the words, it's the language barrier that we have to figure out, and you've obviously done that. Before we get out of here, talk about Hemp Heals. Talk about your foundation and what you've been working on.
Yeah, so I started Hemp Heals in 2011, right after I retired. That was kind of, you know, the beginning of my awakening. I started learning about the nutritional profile of the hemp seed, and started, you know, dipping my head down different rabbit holes, and kind of just learning about the history of cannabis and hemp throughout time, used as medicine, therapeutic resources, and as well as industrial resources, food to fuel to, you know, building materials and textiles. So I just really I started getting a pretty good grasp on the cannabis plant. So I started the Hemp Heals Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit, really dedicated to promoting, you know, cannabis and hemp as a viable renewable resource. And you know, in Pennsylvania has a rich history of growing hemp, and just putting on events and educational platforms to just show the positivity of the cannabis plant. You know, we'd have music festivals where different, you know, different businesses would come and vend, and you have different stuff from hemp pretzel. Philly pretzels are a big thing, where he calls his company Hempsels. So you can see the innovation of, you know, food products, and then you get into the CBD stuff, and you see
pretzel is made out of hemp.
Hemp flour and hemp seed oil, yeah. So each company's out of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, called Hempsels. So nice. You know, a unique branding. Those, man. Absolutely, yeah. And you know, and did a couple different hempcrete workshops. So building with hempcrete, you know, taking the hemp hurd, mixing with lime and one other material, and basically building extremely durable, flame retardant, light walls that are basically far superior than anything else. And again, that's not a new thing. We've done that before, but now, you know what I mean? Because we've gone away from, you know, we've gone away from natural fibers and natural herds to synthetics and chemicals and all that stuff as building materials as well. So again, stuff like that. We did a, you know, hemp paper making workshop, but it really it lands up being just kind of like showing the viability and the positive outlook of the plant, and trying to change the way we look at this, as opposed to this dark underground plant, which is, it's in fact the complete opposite. And I think that's what I, you know, dedicated that to, is a sustainable crop. Farmers need a new crop to rotate in. We need to stop growing GMO corn and soy and all this shit that's poisoning the crap out of us. And we need to get, you know, back to basics. The plant doesn't require pesticides, and that's essentially what, you know, Hemp Heals is just it's a healing plant. It's a phytoremediation. We got a license in Pennsylvania. We're growing hemp with Lehigh University. One of the licenses for phytoremediation, growing hemp in an old zinc mine. It's growing out the contaminants, all the toxins, and you know what I mean. And so it's, you know, when people think the word, or they hear the word hemp heals, the two words hemp heals, they think right away it's just like medical marijuana. Well, yeah, that's a part of it. CBD is a part of it, but what about prevention of disease before that? You know, it's changing the way you eat. Hemp seeds, digestible protein source, high omega-3 fatty acids and 9s and 6 and 9s, all perfectly balanced, fiber, trace minerals. But we kind of, again, going back to disconnection, disconnected from our diet, so it's hard to understand how a diet can be preventative medicine. And then again, the textiles. I mean, hemp doesn't require any pesticides. The textiles you'd wear aren't like cotton, pesticide ridden and dirty crops. And then soaps and body care products from hemp seed oil, CBD oil versus all the garbage that all these companies put out there that dries out your skin. Actually does the complete opposite of what they're actually telling you. So. And the list goes on. It's such a beautiful plant. It's such a unique and diverse plant that I just felt like I needed to do something in the name of it, and that was, that's what I chose to do.
Riley, do you have a website? Social
we do,
media?
Yeah. hemphealsfoundation.com. Twitter, it's hemp_heals. Instagram, it's hemp__heals, and then at Facebook at Hemp Heals Foundation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You do a really, really good job of pulling the lens back and letting people see it from a logical way that sees all the moving parts. Yeah. And keep on doing it, brother.
Amazing,
we
man.
love having you on. Thanks for coming on, Riley.
Next time.
Thanks for having me. Yeah,
next
I appreciate
time,
it.
come to LA, brother.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the plan. I'd love to see you guys sooner than later. Do this
awesome.
All over again.
That'd be awesome.
Right on, man. Well, hey, thanks for tuning in, everybody. This is the Mindful Warrior Podcast, and we're out.
Peace. Thanks for listening to the Mindful Warrior Podcast, brought to you by Athletes for Care, a health and wellness resource for athletes of all ages. Don't miss out on Nate's books, Slow Getting Up and Fantasy Man. Be sure to check out BringTheHurt.com, a pain advocacy platform dedicated to alternative healing practices. Visit BeTrueOrganics.com for all of your CBD needs. Use promo code BRITAIN, all caps 10, for a 10% off discount.